Well, hi everyone. It is so great to be with you today. It was wonderful to be on your end as a listener yesterday, and happy to be chatting with you today. So just by way of background, as Anne-Marie mentioned, I am Jen Jester. I'm based in the Bay Area, so a couple hundred miles away. I hope everyone is staying healthy, both with, of course, the pandemic, but also the wildfire smoke and everything else happening. So thank you for joining, given everything that I know everyone is juggling right now. And it's a real testament to your commitment to the region and attainment and success in the region that you're making the time to spend 2 days with the Tortoise Shared Vision program. So really honored to be with you. So I'm going to be spending time today talking a little bit about the more in depth than you went into yesterday around the collective impact approach. I'm going to start with a bit of a refresher. For some of you, this might be super familiar. You might be able to even give this piece of the training. And for some of you, hopefully this is kind of a grounding in some of the formal language and terminology that we talk about when we talk about collective impact. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 key mindsets that I think it is helpful to bring into how we take action as we do our collective impact work together. And we'll have a couple activities and personal reflection pieces as we go, and happy to take Q&A as well. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and responses and conversation in the chat is definitely welcome and encouraged as well. One more thing, Anne-Marie can make, and the GIA team can make all of the materials available after. So feel free to take notes, but know that you can also access a copy of the materials after. So when we talk about collective impact as an approach and cross-sector collaboration, I think it's helpful to start by thinking about why we're all coming together. What are the types of challenges, problems, or even opportunities that are bringing groups of folks together? And I'm going to borrow an analogy from a book called Getting to Maybe. And in Getting to Maybe, they talk about 3 kinds of problems. First, they talk about simple problems. And simple problems are problems that have a very straightforward recipe that if you follow it time and again, you will get a predictable result. And the example that they use, or excuse me, the analogy that they use is baking a cake. You know, I certainly am not a very good cook, let alone a baker, but if I have a recipe and the right ingredients, I think that I can follow a recipe. I know I can follow a recipe and bake a cake. And when we talk about solving problems that are very straightforward, simple problems, there's sort of a known solution that if you follow the right steps, you can probably get to a predictable answer. The second kind of problem we talk about, or they talk about in Getting to Maybe, are complicated problems. And the analogy they use is sending a rocket to the moon. Now, this is certainly not as straightforward as baking a cake, but with the right technology, the right training, the right folks in the room, you can follow instructions, very complicated ones, but you can get a result that you expect, and it is also hopefully very predictable. And if you try it one time and then you follow the right technology again, you probably can send a rocket to the moon more than once. Again, not something the average bear can do, but with the right technology and training, the right learning, you can achieve that goal. The third kind of problem that we talk about are complex problems. And with complex problems, what we're really talking about here are problems where there's not a formula or a recipe that is known to deliver a predictable result. What happens in one place might not happen the exact same way in a different place. You have to take the context into account. You have to think about the interaction between many different influences. You have to think about how you learn and adapt over time. And the analogy they use for this is raising a child. So as you can imagine, with raising a child, if you have 2 children, I can attest to this personally, you do the same thing with one that you do exactly the same with another, you're not going to have the exact same outcome because children are complex. You have to really understand them. You have to think about all of the different influences that are contributing to their well-being. So you have to think about their education and their health and their social and emotional development and maybe their spirituality and all of these different factors. If you weave those together, all of those contribute to your outcome. And you have to adapt and learn as you go. And the reason I share this analogy is because often in the social sector, when we're seeking social impact, folks approach problems as though they are simple or complicated. And we're looking for a predictable recipe or formula. We're looking to replicate exactly something that looks somewhere else, do it the exact same way and expect it to work the same way. We're looking for kind of magic programs that might solve our challenges. And what we know is certainly the issues that you all are working on in the region around educational attainment and economic development and workforce development, those are very complex issues. Those are things where you really have to take into account many different factors and learn and adapt as you go. You can't just do what worked somewhere else the exact same way and expect the same outcomes. And so I share this because when we are talking about collective impact, we're not talking about a recipe or a formula. We are talking about bringing people together, many influences together, to work together to learn and adapt and embrace the complexity to work toward the outcomes that everyone knows we are seeking together. And so collective impact is an approach to really bring folks together, put all of our eyes and brains on the problem and put all of our different assets together and learn and adapt as we go in service of achieving the big picture result that we're all coming together to achieve. So I share this also because I think people often think about collective impact as, you know, if I just follow these instructions, that's all it takes. Well, they are a basis and I'm going to share them, but we have to think about how we adapt them in the context of the work in the Inland Empire as we go. So collective impact formally is the group of commitment of a group of important actors from different sectors in the community to a common agenda for solving a specific social problem at scale. And the Inland Empire certainly is scale when we're talking about collective impact. And this is the formal definition that was shared in the Stanford Social Innovation Review article that was sort of the grounding for the collective impact approach. But this is an approach that has existed for many decades. The article that I'm pointing to here and the Collective Impact Forum and our host organizations, FSG, have given some language and built a field, help contribute to building a field of practice. But I want to recognize that this is an approach and honor the work that's been happening in communities even before the publication of this article. But what this article does is lays out what we call the 5 conditions of collective impact that are what the authors identified as the core elements seen across many communities collaborating across sectors in pursuing a shared vision for change. And again, this isn't a recipe or a formula, but rather conditions that are helpful to have in place as you bring people together to work together in service of a shared result. And for those of you who are familiar with collective impact, this probably looks familiar. This is kind of that key frame that we use to think about structuring collective impact work. So I'll briefly touch on these and we can share many resources for those that might want to go deeper on them at a later time. The 5 are, first, a common agenda. So this is sort of a shared understanding of the problem, the context, the opportunity amongst all the partners that are coming together to work together, and a shared vision for change. What is it that we as a region are working to accomplish together? So, you know, you talked a lot about regional goals yesterday. Those really anchor the common agenda. So increasing educational attainment with a specific emphasis on accelerating success for historically marginalized student groups. That is one key element. I know you talked through five goals for the region yesterday. Those are really the anchor of the common agenda, that shared vision. The second thing, shared measurement. So this really is intended to say that the groups that are coming together are using data, looking at data together to inform your work. So in the early days, that's using shared measurement or shared data to set your goals and understand current state. And then as the work unfolds, looking at data together to see how progress is unfolding. And those that are coming together around the table agree to kind of a shared definition of a couple of very important indicators of change. So that doesn't mean that every participating organization has the exact same monitoring and evaluation system, but what we are saying is that there are a couple indicators that everyone agrees to track in the same way. Because we know that if you sit down with, let's say, a dozen partners around a table, you might have different ways of defining and measuring some core elements. So attendance numbers, who exactly are folks including in their attendance numbers? Graduation rates, are we all sharing a shared measurement, shared definition for how we are tracking those graduation rates for our population? And when you come to that shared agreement, it allows much more shared learning because you are really talking apples to apples. And it enables folks to hold each other accountable, sort of peer accountability to greater progress if you actually know that you're talking about data in the same way. So lots more we could say on shared measurement, but using data in a shared way is a key element of the collective impact approach. Number 3, mutually reinforcing activities. This is a bit of a jargony way of saying this is the work that partners take on as they move through their partnership work together. And when partners are coming together in collective impact, in defining those mutually reinforcing activities, it can be really helpful to spend time understanding each other's approaches, to understand where there might be areas of duplication, where using the same organizations and resources, if you reduce that duplication, you could expand the reach of folks around the table. You might also look at where there might be gaps. So you might look for overlap and you might look for gaps that present themselves when folks are coming together to understand your work more deeply around a shared table. In addition, we also always want to be talking about not only what programs we can take on together, but how can we think together about changing the systems that are holding the challenges in place. And I know Lauren and Karthik talked a bit about system change yesterday as you talked through that groundwater approach. How can we really change some of the, the lake and the groundwater? I'll also be talking about that more, but we always, when we think about mutually reinforcing activities, want to talk about both what are the programs that the partners can take on, as well as what kind of system changes can we pursue that any single organization probably couldn't successfully pursue on its own, but together we can pursue in a much more meaningful way. So 4th, continuous communication. This really means both formal communication structures that are invested in. So this can be regular cadences, commitment and regular cadence of meetings, shared websites, email lists, etc., kind of the standard stuff. But in addition, with continuous communication, I want to emphasize building trust and relationships so that you can have greater informal communication as well. And then finally, backbone support. So this really means that there is staff that is dedicated to guiding the work of the collaborative forward. So staff who's wake up every day thinking about the health of the collaborative and shepherding the process forward on behalf of all of the partners. So these are the 5 core conditions of collective impact, the approach that really a lot of the work that GIA is helping to facilitate on behalf of the region is grounded in.